I'm a bad motherfucker.
An award-winning journalist, as well as the editor-in-chief and founder of the independent investigative news website The Gray Zone, with an A. He's also the best-selling author of several books, including Goliath, The 51-Day War, and The Management of Savagery. Please welcome back to the show, Max Blumenthal. Hey, Max.
Hey, Jimmy. How's it going?
Good. Good to see you. Now, the reason why I have you is, do you remember this story? I want to show everybody. Remember, this was the headline. We've covered that this would turn out to be a fake story. Remember this fake story by the Amber Heard? This is what we like. The New York Times, the Amber Heard of newspapers.
And it's not really fair because Amber Heard technically has put out way less huge lies.
That's technically she has. Screams without words how Hamas weaponized sexual violence on October 7th. And so this has been debunked a million times, but it was first debunked by the Gray Zone. Here's the Gray Zone from December 31st. They did a video on it. New York Times Hamas rape hoax exposed. Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate methodically debunked the Times' bogus report alleging Palestinian militants systematically raped Israelis on October 7th and respond to their own critics' sloppy attacks. So
Anat Schwartz was not telling the truth.
So here's your article on January 10th at the Gray Zone website. Screams without proof. Questions for the New York Times about shoddy Hamas rape story. But then, just this is from February 28th. This is from just the other day. It's from The Intercept. They're acting like they broke this story.
The story can finally be told properly.
Between the hammer and the anvil, which is, I guess that's where Jeremy Scahill's head has been lately.
Why they crap the title up of your much better title?
They're breaking the same story. Obviously, they acknowledge the Gray Zone, so no worries. Oh, no, wait, they didn't do that.
Ryan Grimm wouldn't overlook something like that.
In this one, they did just acknowledge us in passing, just so no one clips this out. Like, it was sort of an afterthought acknowledgement, but we'll get into that.
So here is also Amy Goodman. A new expose by The Intercept has found major discrediting flaws in the New York Times December investigation, claiming that Hamas committed. So we speak to reporter Jeremy Scahill about the grave errors and misinformation that his team found. Here's Amy Goodman pretending The Intercept broke the story. Hey, I guess that's why it's called The Intercept. They intercept stories from better outlets and then pretend that it was their scoop. Here's Aaron Mate. He says, correction for Democracy Now! The Intercept is not the one that found major discrediting flaws in New York Times Hamas sexual violence scam. Those flaws were uncovered by Intifada, the Gray Zone News, and Mondoweiss months ago, well before The Intercept and Democracy Now! Jumped on board. This Democracy Now! Segment fails to mention that.
Oh, so wait. So the Intercept, in passing, did say it was from your outlet, but Democracy Now! Completely omitted that. And I guess Jeremy Scahill wasn't in a hurry to correct it on the show.
Well, there was a previous article by The Intercept about the controversy, and we can get into that. But that just pretended we didn't exist.
So their original story pretended like that Gray Zone didn't. Here, Max Blumenthal tweets that out and says, nice summary of reporting by the Gray Zone, Intifada, and Mondoweiss from 3 months ago. Nicely done. And do you know, Aaron worked at Democracy Now!
I know.
And so for Amy Goodman it's kind of extra gross for her not to give a tip of the hat. Democracy Now! Not only refuses to credit the Gray Zone and others who actually debunk the New York Times, it promoted the Hamas rape hoax back when we were exposing it as false. This is from December 6, 2023, Democracy Now! Segment, uncritically echoing bogus Israeli claims of survivor testimonies. Let's watch a little bit.
The UN Monday heard accounts of sexual assaults during Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. Speakers criticized the UN and others for failing to promptly investigate and condemn sexual crimes. Former Facebook executive Sheryl Sandberg, who helped organize the event, was a key speaker. Hillary Clinton sent videotaped remarks. President Biden Tuesday condemned Hamas for the alleged attacks, which the group has denied. The nonprofit Physicians for Human Rights Israel last month released a report detailing survivor accounts of sexual assaults, which it said were widespread on October 7th. This is Orit Soliciano, head of Israel's Association of Rape Crisis Centers.
Most of the people, I assume, that have passed this kind of terror are dead because they were shot. There is information from people who saw what happened, but everybody should understand there should not be any anticipation that the survivors will come and speak out loud with their face. It's not like Me Too. This is a horrible and different thing.
What?
So what she's saying is,
you just can't talk to them and don't expect to hear.
Don't expect to actually hear anybody say they were raped or anything. That's not how this works. How it works is we make this stuff up as propaganda, and then it gets printed on the front page of the New York Times by people who aren't even journalists.
And why is this so much worse? Because they're that racist against Palestinians, so it's much worse than a sexual assault in any other country?
I guess
that's what you're implying. This is so shameful. They can't even show their face. They actually have to wear burqas now.
Yeah.
They're so ashamed.
They're so ashamed
that a dirty Muslim touched them.
So Ray McGovern, who we know as ex-CIA truth teller, he says, I'm not surprised about Democracy Now! I found it hard to conclude that Amy can act as a cog in the system until I was put on the no invite list. Amy couldn't believe that Dems come spooks fabricated Russiagate. She picked Empty Wheel, who admitted sharing inside information on Russiagate with the FBI out of patriotism. She outed her own source to the FBI. That's what Empty Wheel, that's what he's talking about. Democracy Now! Is the Bernie Sanders of independent media, and that is why we call her Amy Goodbad, host of Hypocrisy Now!
Is that why one corner of her mouth is turned up and the other down at all times?
I think
because she embodies the...
it might be. Well, here is Ryan Grimm repeating. This is back from December 4th. Instead of debunking it, he repeats it. He says Jayapal called the sexual violence carried out by Hamas horrific and condemned it repeatedly in this interview. So he's validating that. He's not saying, hey, those were bogus. And Aaron Mate comes in and says, how do you know Hamas carried out sexual violence? Jayapal parroting evidence-free allegations is not something to welcome. You should at least use the word alleged. And he doesn't. He didn't use the word alleged. And, well, there was no cover. This is from December 24th. There was no cover-up of Hamas's sexual violence on October 7th. The right manufactured it. The media and feminists bought it, and Israel is exploiting the outcry. What, the right manufactured? So at least there's some original spin on the story.
Well, you have to read the first line of or the first paragraph to see where the Intercept was at that point.
Okay, it's one thing is true. It says Hamas and other Palestinian militants committed unspeakable sexual violence against Israeli civilians on October 7th. Well, that turns out that's the
one thing that wasn't true.
One thing is true.
So the thing that drives me nuts is that the Intercept is now shitting all over the New York Times for that false story when they printed just as false things in their own. And so I said this on the show last Friday, and I said the Intercept shouldn't be wagging their finger at anybody. They should be wagging their finger at themselves for their shitty coverage, which I knew this. So anyway, here's one more. To underscore that the Intercept has no evidentiary standards on the Hamas rape claim, consider this insane line. Yes, some individuals and extreme left organizations have denied these atrocities or upheld them as justified resistance. Forget for a second that the rape claims are unsubstantiated. Who are these individuals and extreme left organizations that have upheld rape as justified resistance? This is pure invention.
It was Roxanne Gay.
Okay. And here's Ryan Grimm saying this is so then when it came out that New York Times story was fabricated, Ryan Grimm, one of the least ethical guys in all of journalism, says this is horrifying. The guy lies about activists, healthcare activists. He lies about YouTubers to defend politicians on the regular. This is what he does. And here he is now pretending that his own publication didn't publish the exact same lies. He goes, and himself too, by the way, tweet out the exact same lie. He goes, this is horrifying on so many levels. How could the Times let this happen?
They know I wouldn't question them.
I like how Aaron goes, good question. Here's a related question. How could the Intercept let this happen? And he doesn't have a comeback.
My favorite Ryan picture. Oh, Ryan.
So,
CIA codename Muddy Waters.
codename Muddy Waters, because that's what he's here to do, muddy the waters. And he says that, then here's Ryan Grimm again, the balls on this guy to just be I guess we should get the Hypocrites of the Year award. Glad to see the New York Times taking internal and external criticism of its coverage seriously. It's important to any organization to be able to self-reflect, learn from mistakes, and improve. He should be saying this to a mirror. And then he goes, oh, wait, that's not what they're doing. Yeah, that's not what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's not what you're doing.
Is Pierre thinking about turning things around, or what do you even have to do with it, you chump?
I like, so Aaron says, if you want to understand why Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill don't want to credit the journalist who first debunked the New York Times rape story, here's one reason. Not confident to let the facts speak for themselves, they're still going out of their way to pay lip service to that very narrative that Hamas did commit these rapes.
But how do you maintain a relationship with power, as the Great Crystal Ball told us?
That's what, as the Great Crystal Ball tells us. Here we go.
Two ways to think about what happened on October 7th. The first way is that it was a day of extraordinary mayhem and violence. The Israeli defenses melted away. Not only did you have several thousand Hamas fighters stream across the fence, but you also had hundreds of civilians, some associated with gangs, come across. And in that context, the idea that there would be no sexual assault is not taken seriously by pretty much anybody who understands kind of war and violence. That's one way to think about October.
Okay.
So
what's the other way?
So maybe lying for power.
You don't take war and violence seriously.
You don't take it seriously. Maybe lying for the powerful would go easier for him if he would just switched over to the Kyle Kalinske blonde web surfer here dude guy, because whatever he's doing now, that's not working. Aaron then says, first of all, October 7th wasn't a war. That was a one-day guerrilla operation in a very limited time frame. To frame it in the context of a war is in fact not serious.
It was a prison break.
Second, yes, that was more of a prison break. Second, that's not how you approach allegations. And an allegation needs to be backed by credible evidence. In the absence of any credible evidence, there's no need to pay lip service to the allegation unless you're pandering.
Also, your low-flow shower head is not helping you, like that Seinfeld episode.
Aaron also says they would do the same thing in their latest article. They do the same thing in their latest article. They keep repeating. The question has never been whether individual acts of sexual assault may have occurred on October 7th.
I believe it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, I think there may have. Why are you bothering me with may have? They actually had the nerve to put that family in the photo.
So why they have to? Yes.
Those are the ones in the photo saying, hey, our daughter wasn't raped. Can you imagine that? Your whole family's picture there. Oh, we're sad because of the rape. And you had no idea they're going to make this
no
nonsense
idea
up
they're going to
about
make
your
this
dead
up.
child.
So what this is propaganda that the Intercept and Ryan Grimm is happy to repeat along with Democracy Now! Because they have to make the people. So because what Israel is doing right now is so horrific, they have to somehow make the people they're doing it to be just a little bit worse than they are. And that's the point of this. Let me bring in Max Blumenthal, who actually broke this story and that the Intercept hijacked and Democracy Now! Pretended they didn't do it. What do you have to say about this, Max?
Well, this is like the role of the Intercept and Democracy Now! Is like when a narrative starts to emerge that's challenging power and they realize that it's actually legitimate and, we've already taken all the attacks for it. We've already been smeared again and again. Thanks. And then they realize it's true months later after validating it. They come in and basically claim credit for it, take the baton and run with it. They aren't posing as actual alternative. They're not actually like alternative media. They're what the New York Times might have been if it had been slightly more ethical and slightly more independent. And many of them have aspirations to work for places like the New York Times. So they have this culture of respectability politics, which is why they couldn't cite the gray zone in their initial piece by Ryan Grimm and Daniel Boguslaw, which was about how the New York Times shelved this edition of its daily podcast under internal pressure. Basically, the staff was freaking out because they had published this piece by Jeffrey Gettleman and Anat Schwartz and company that we blew out of the water. We, Electronic Intifada, which is actually one of the first online pro-Palestine or Palestine-oriented publications taking on the Israeli propaganda, period, that ever appeared online, and Mondoweiss, which is one of the first major, maybe the first major Jewish anti-Zionist kind of news and analysis outlet. So they just came and just took all the credit from everyone. They didn't tell their readers why there was this controversy at the New York Times. I know for a fact it was because of us. Me ripping to shreds from top to bottom all the sources that the New York Times relied on, all their demonstrably false testimonies. The Intercept, as you demonstrated in that intro, hadn't even weighed in yet. So the readers weren't even informed on why this controversy had developed. And then when they come back with their follow-up piece, which includes Jeremy Scahill on the byline, I basically had to lobby someone at the Intercept and say, "Are you going to credit us this time?" And they did, but I was credited just with like one tweet. I kind of had to like help them find it, and we were relegated to the sidelines of the article. And the article, the subheader of that article is the story of the New York Times controversy. You know, if you're going to tell the story, it should start with us ripping that piece to shreds. But again, the readers aren't told how that piece was clinically dismantled. And now they have a new piece up, Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill, which it does credit us, Electronic Intifada and Mondoweiss. But again, it's credited as they had previously raised issues, as if they're doing the debunking, when in fact, this new piece, all it does is recycle debunking I've already done. In fact, I went even further than them in exposing the phony source that they're exposing now. So they're basically just trying to come in and take credit for work we've already done, fundraise off it, maybe win some awards. I don't know what.
And water it down.
What the issue is.
And water it down.
And yes, sort of suppress the power behind it by qualifying and saying maybe there was some rape. You know, militants can be kind of rapey. I mean, maybe it did happen.
Yeah. It's not, hey,
actually,
rape's a real
anyone who's
thing.
serious.
Oh, I guess there's no such thing as rape, Max. I guess that's what you remember that. Oh, I guess because
actually,
this was a lie.
We could
that
say
means
maybe. Let's just say maybe. I mean, we don't totally know what happened on October 7th, but you know what Ryan said there was that anyone who's serious about war and violence has to assume that this happened, even though there is no evidence.
Yeah.
So as a journalist has to uphold some evidentiary standard, but none is being upheld here. And that's, again, part of the respectability politics culture that pervades the Intercept, where they're more concerned about how they're perceived by legacy media than by their own audience or by the grassroots political forces that are out in the streets surrounding the Israeli embassy, putting pressure on institutions like the New York Times and protesting this genocide in Gaza. And so that, to me, it's not real, independent alternative media. It's sort of like an ersatz version of the New York Times. It's not surprising that they've shared staff with so many mainstream outlets.
Dude, Jeremy from the Quartering is better than Ryan Grimm. I'll say it right now.
No doubt about it.
No, Jeremy the Quartering, way better than Ryan Grimm.
Well, Jeremy went on Democracy Now! Initially about, some piece he did debunking Israel's atrocity fabrication, something we, Electronic Intifada and Mondoweiss already did, not crediting us. And then he said he learned this from his own research. Those were almost his precise words.
Jeremy Scahill?
Oh, Scahill.
He's talking about...
I guess his research was reading the Gray Zone.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking the whole time. Like, we just explored a bombshell report from another better source. No, I made this other guy reports on nerd stuff usually, but actually has...
that would be like me, check out my new book. It's about Blackwater.
I got to read that
I mean-
Squad book still, because there is a part where Bill Clinton apparently saying about Hillary said she couldn't sell pussy on a troop train as her trying to have a woman angle, how bad of an idea that was for her campaign. That is in his book, supposedly.
And
Well, I mean, that's a good scoop, and you know, I'm glad they're bringing.
I'm
the
breaking that
forward.
story.
and Kurt's breaking that story.
Well,
I want to be the first one to
I mean,
break that story.
Ryan had sources in the New York Times. I'm glad they got that out there. It's deepening the crisis for the New York Times. I'm glad that's happening. It's just unethical to not cite us and the outlets that actually created this crisis. And it says everything about the kind of mainstream alternative media that we're seeing crop up. That's like fake alternative media, billionaire-backed outlets. I mean, you see it on the right too. Billionaire-backed outlets and phony alternative podcasts that are actually reproducing mainstream narratives while co-opting a certain element of what's germinating in alternative media. And here, you know, they waited for months. I was attacked so many times for like Katha Pollitt, the arch second wave in-house feminist at The Nation, called me and Aaron rape denialists, which was slightly better than what she said about Matt Taibbi and Mark Ames, which is she just called them rapists.
She didn't call you rape apologists?
She called us rape denialists.
That's even worse.
Yeah, it's sort of like a Holocaust denier. But I mean, we were getting these attacks, and all along The Intercept was sort of dabbling with the same narrative. Like, oh yeah, the one thing is true. Hamas did this. And then all of a sudden, they realize, wait a minute, people at the New York Times, like staffers, are taking our work seriously because they actually read it and they realize that we have demonstrated that this story is just false, that what these sources are saying is not backed up by evidence. And then they come in when it's safe. So to me, that's also sort of, I mean, that's just typical of mainstream alternative media, is waiting till a narrative's safe, but it's still kind of contrary to, because mainstream media has moved so far into the pro-war neocon realm that it's like lost all credibility.
It's directly in a billionaire's asshole all the time now.
Well,
that's how far it's moved. It's in the colon now.
I mean, this to me, him tweeting this out on January 2nd, this is horrifying on so many levels. How could the Times let this happen? He'll never say that about his own Intercept that actually is still doing it, by the way.
How can you let it happen,
How
Ryan?
could you let it happen? You're the DC bureau chief. How could you let it happen at the Intercept? It happened at your publication. He's going to, let's pretend that didn't happen, and let's pretend that these guys somehow have integrity, and that somehow Ryan Grimm is the arbiter of truth and journalistic integrity. A guy who's on the take from billionaires. How many billionaires to pay his salary now?
I don't know.
Well, it was up to 3 at one point. And
hey, Jamila PayPal, she condemned those rapes, those fake rapes that never happened. So cut her some slack. What a chump he is.
The guy. I mean, I'm reminded of if you on Twitter, if you look up #GrimJob, you'll see a lot of his best work. One of them was when he tweeted out a deceptively edited video about me, saying I didn't get a joke that David Sirota was making, and he cut the part off where I said, "Hey, that's a good joke David Sirota made it."
Really?
Yes, he did that. Yes. That's the DC bureau chief, so desperate to try to smear a YouTuber because I do the thing they can't stand.
Wow.
Tell the truth about them.
He cut that video up about as well as he does his own hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into, personal attacks. You all have
I do.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have like several more
That's
loaded
your
if I may.
prerogative. That's your prerogative. I mean, you have a different history with Ryan than I do, but it's really, to me, this is about just the culture that The Intercept represents, and that they just can't, like, I just couldn't believe reading the latest piece they did where they're just going over information, research I already did, that I already put out there. And then at the end, there's a throwaway line about how we had raised questions about some of this. It's like, why even bother putting that out? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, I'm sure that, like, I don't think it adds any value. The New York Times stuff, great. You moved it forward. Tell your readers why there is a controversy at the New York Times. Tell the truth. And they didn't do it, and I know for a fact they didn't do it because the gray zone is considered toxic, because we challenge other anti-imperialist narratives that upset powerful people. So we challenge the
Russiagate.
That we would challenge Russiagate when, the mainstream alternative sort of left liberal media was lapping it up. All these sites that have fallen apart. We challenged the phony Uyghur genocide narrative that was used to ramp up the new Cold War on China. We challenged the whole narrative of Assad deploying chemical weapons in Duma, for example, which justify US and UK missile strikes. And throughout all of those times, The Intercept was on the other side, pushing the dirty war on Syria, pushing the new Cold War on China with dubious leaks. Actually, a month before Qasem Soleimani in Iran was assassinated, The Intercept published Iran leaks from a dubious source. It looks like Western intelligence might have leaked those to The Intercept. So they're running basically press releases for the Al-Qaeda affiliated white helmets at The Intercept.
Yes.
So that's how they're always catering to imperial narratives. Now you have a situation where what Israel's done is so horrendous in the Gaza Strip that, average liberals are horrified by this. I was actually at a protest encampment 2 days ago outside the mansion of Tony Blinken, Secretary of State Tony Blinken.
Really?
That these courageous Palestinian activists have been maintaining 24/7. They've camped out in tents outside his home, and anytime someone goes in or out of his gates, they just immediately start chanting. They pour fake blood on the ground in front of his motorcade. It's amazing. No legacy media coverage at all. No DC local media coverage. And car after car drives by in this wealthy neighborhood, and people are saluting them because people have had it with what Israel is doing. If either on the side of humanity or not, there's no middle ground there. And so it's kind of easy for an outlet like The Intercept or Democracy Now! To come in and start challenging Israeli propaganda. They've lied so many times. But when it wasn't easy, they were always on the other side. And there's been no accountability there for the positions they took on Syria, for example, when we were just getting mercilessly attacked for challenging these obviously staged events which were designed to cause regime change. The same way that Israel has lied about key elements of October 7th in order to create consent for what it's doing in Gaza, which is a regime change operation. That's what we're witnessing. They want to eradicate Hamas, which is the legitimate governor of the occupied, besieged Gaza Strip. They won an election. They have a popular constituency. And as a result of that, we're seeing the same thing we're seeing in Syria, mass starvation. Because when you start to come in and try to destroy a government, you start sanctioning it, besieging it. You won't even let police operate in the streets. It turns into Mad Max. It's impossible to get aid in. Aid trucks get raided, and people and obviously food isn't getting in because Israel's blocking it. But people start to starve. But that's the same thing that happened in Syria. And The Intercept was on the other side. So what we need to have like a clear accounting of where these outlets stand on the issue of imperialism, on the issue on the system that makes this genocide in Gaza possible. Like, it's the same system that's supporting Ukraine, that's supporting the Ukrainian military. It is the same system that's flooding Taiwan with arms.
Yes.
And encircling China. It is the same system that is encircling Iran with military bases. And it doesn't matter if you agree that women should have to wear hijab or not. That system,
as long as they wear a mask,
is making life miserable for everybody.
It's the same.
And so we're opposed to that system. The Intercept can't seem to make up its mind, and now it's coming in and kind of trying to gain traction as this grassroots outlet taking on the man by basically Israeling our work.
I know you wanted to mention that the Jimmy Dore show was also out in front on the Syria gas attacks, and
well, you were like the cavalry that came in and gave us a platform when no one else would. It was like the reinforcement that we needed at that time. And you spoke to such a broader audience than we were, and it made sense to people. And that's why, like, you know, I think that's why Aaron Mate was like going down the rabbit hole on the OPCW, but it was thanks to you that people were able to understand the importance of that investigation.
Yeah, I'm still pretty.
And The Intercept was just attacking it again and again.
Yeah, the scarf sniffing was the part where they really kind of blew it on the fake chemical story. Oh, it's mustard.
The CNN. Oh yeah,
and the New York Times. I mean, the New York Times had like they recreated what they wanted the Duma attack to be, where they basically had a cartoonist illustrate the chemical attack.
The thing that courts can't do anymore because it creates false impressions. The 3D computer model. Of what
they won an award for that.
Like.
But they won an award for that, didn't they, Max?
Yeah, after it's been all you said, you can't use it anymore as evidence.
Yeah, they won an award. Yeah. They won an award for a cartoon illustration of something that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
I mean,
well, it did work. I mean, I guess a lot of idiots believe it.
Mike McRae said.
I remember after Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by Trump, The Intercept had a panel in New York about it with the New York Times. They teamed up with the New York Times on a panel. Wow. It's like, how can you team up with the New York Times on a panel about one of the most hideous acts by U.S. empire? And of course, Mehdi Hasan was on that panel. He now has a mainstream alternative media outlet called Zeteo that he's pushing because he was pushed out of MSNBC for telling the truth on one issue. It's like all the way up to October 6th, all the way Mehdi's shilling for Biden, selling the war in Ukraine, selling the new Cold War with China by hyping up Uyghur genocide, doing
supporting censorship,
all the work that, and just being a member of the mainstream media. So before that, he was at Al Jazeera and The Intercept, and he was crafting the trajectory of his career so he could one day join MSNBC or a mainstream outlet. And now he's independent, and he's declaring that he's billionaire free and that he will finally tell the bracing truth about how the media has coddled Donald Trump, and if the media isn't held accountable, that Donald Trump will win again.
Have you read his book?
That's your criticism of the media?
Wow.
They've coddled Donald Trump. Like, I've never seen them, and I don't support Trump, but I've never seen the media be more unfair to a president.
Have you read his book, How to Win Any Argument Except That One?
Yeah, just interrupt your guest constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I called him out for lying about Assad and for lying about the gas attacks. I called him out he even smeared Seymour Hersh. I mean, that's the kind of guy that fits in well at The Intercept. My
friend?
The Intercept will never tell you the truth about they wouldn't do it. It was just or Russiagate. They wouldn't. I remember Ken Klippenstein, who's such a fraud. He said he didn't cover Russiagate because it was boring. The biggest story of his lifetime. He tried to pretend he was also one of those guys who pushed that ivermectin was horse paste. You know, whatever the establishment.
I remember him just celebrating the deaths of like overweight people who were in their mid 80s.
Yes,
who happened to be unvaccinated. He was just gleefully delighted with that.
Yes, yes.
Which also speaks to the culture at The Intercept.
That's the culture at The Intercept, of course. I mean, they started out good, and they went downhill faster than anything.
I mean, and you have it on the right too. Like there's this alternative veneer that various billionaire-backed characters uphold because mainstream media, including Fox News, post-Tucker, are just so discredited among the right-wing grassroots, and they basically steal a lot of ideas and soften them from the dissident right and also from the left, and sort of fostering this culture. But like, you can look at Bobby Kennedy and his campaign also as a dimension of this. All of them swallow the poison pill of Israel, of Zionism, including Alex Jones, for example. He just will not take on. He says he's against the New World Order, and he will not take on.
We brought it up on the show.
No, I know he was against the Israel narrative in Gaza. So maybe
he acknowledged every goddamn thing we said to him.
Everything we said, he didn't fight. He didn't push back, and he acknowledged it. So I had heard that about him too, and so that's why we brought it up to him But right, I'm not misremembering this, right?
I remember
Kurt?
we were shocked because either you or I brought it up. Was chomping at the bit to bring it up, and he was immediately.
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so maybe he goes back and forth. I don't know. But,
he did better than Vivek promised.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he certainly did.
I mean, that's another
Vivek Senior Promi.
Vivek Senior Promi. He tried to immediately pivot to the genocide of the Uyghurs, so away from Gaza to the. And
I go, well, how many people, Vivek? He goes, 1 million. I go, well, Gaza's 2 million.
So, because he goes, let's just look at the numbers. There's 1 million people in the Uyghurs that are being. You go, well, how many million? Well, there's 2 million.
Slaughtering 30,000 people and thousands of more are missing under the rubble. 70,000 are wounded in just such a short time. Like 15,000 are children. How is that meritless? And they just can't answer the question.
Max, you're telling me if I get attacked, I have a right to self-defense by starving 3 generations of the guy's family? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, they're starving them to death.
That's what they're calling.
They're bragging about it.
They're bragging about it. They're like happily doing it. They torture them on camera. They're Palestinian prisoners now. Put it on social media, and we're like supposed to just consider that legitimate because they were attacked one day.
Well, that's why.
I mean, there's today actually. The New York Times is still getting away with this. A.G. Sulzberger, who's the publisher of the New York Times, spoke at Thomson Reuters Institute. He delivered this keynote speech boasting of their sexual violence October 7th investigation as one of their proudest works on Israel-Palestine.
Jesus.
So it's like he's just pretending like the controversy isn't even happening.
Well, he's proud of that the lie spread. I still see people like the guy drove me to the airport, like brought up like, it never happened. I can't wait to tell people how that never happened. It actually delights me to, because I'll watch him do like Dershowitz when they're asking about Epstein. He goes, well, I'm surprised with all the feminists about all the rapes that were going on on October 7th. Feminists like Alan Dershowitz bought in real hard to it.
I mean, he's definitely accused of sexually assaulting more named women than Hamas.
Yeah, we know. They showed their faces, not these mysterious ones you're not supposed to look for.
Well, listen.
And isn't it weird for Hillary Clinton to get up there and just make these general allegations of mass rape by Hamas when there are actual female accusers of the man who's still her husband, and there are no actual living accusers against Hamas.
You got to bring them in the room like Bannon did. The only way to stop her with that is to actually physically have them in front of her while she's trying to do her fake rape talk.
It's like, what about us? I mean, if Hamas had raped those women, maybe Hillary would advocate for them.
But not if Bill Clinton did, right?
I just think maybe she should just, Streisand effect, stay away from that territory.
You would think, wouldn't you?
What's that?
You would think. I'd be like, hey, that's kind of a weak spot with my well-known husband, who by my own apparent standards is guilty beyond belief. I probably don't want to touch on that too much. No, you got to dig all the way through when you're in a hole.
And this isn't like Me Too. It's like there are no actual living people or allegations, and it will take years for us to find out. That's what we were told today by the United Nations Special Representative on Sexual Violence, Pramila Patten, who said, we won't have any evidence possibly for years. And then by then, Israel will have enacted the Samson option and nuked half of Europe because it would have been sanctioned. But, by then, we won't remember. This is the level of bullshit that we're being fed by major institutions, major figures. We're being lied to. The New York Times publisher is pretending that we didn't debunk this entire investigation. Just everyone sees through the lies. Everyone who is a critical thinker, who's capable of who's capable of understanding context and history, sees through the lies, and nothing is happening, and they feel just so voiceless and filled with rage. And that's why I think so many people identify with Aaron Bushnell, who burned himself alive in a form of protest, not suicide, but what he called an extreme form of protest. Obviously, I don't know anyone who would do that, who would go that far, but it's just the feeling of just being so frustrated and angry that we're being lied to on such a massive scale while people are being starved. A genocide is being live streamed, and it feels like there's nothing we can do. There's no major candidate we can get behind. The only thing voters can do in the Democratic primaries is vote uncommitted. Kamala Harris is just straight up lying to us, saying she wants a ceasefire. Then she waits for the applause, and then she says, for 6 weeks. And then by then, Super Tuesday and the primaries will be over, and then we'll be safe from the uncommitted voters. And it's reported in paper after paper as Kamala Harris calls for ceasefire.
Yep.
It's just the lies of the media are just so deep that, and it goes back to the conversation that we started out having, which is that there are other, we from the beginning, from October 7th, along with this coalition of independent outlets, have been speaking for those people who feel that way. And The Intercept has come in kind of late in the game and realized, wait, this is where the action's at.
Interception.
Interception.
Interception, yeah. We used to call them the Interslept because they were like so slow on the draw, or the Interventionist because they were pushing the military intervention in Syria. But now I guess it's intercepted.
Well, Max, I appreciate you coming on and covering this rip-off of your reporting and the ignoring of it by Democracy Now! And The Intercept. So everybody should check out Max Blumenthal's work over at The Gray Zone. Anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
No, it's been a while, so it's good to, it was like a catch-up session.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's been forever. I can't remember the last time I talked to you.
Well, let's do it again soon.
Okay, yeah. Hey, did you see that story about how they arrested that Blaze reporter on over January 6th bullshit?
I saw it. I haven't really dug into it.
Okay, I'm going to dig into it. All right, Max, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. Hope to see you soon.
All right, Jimmy, thanks so
Hey,
much.
are you going
Good
to
see you,
Icarus?
Kurt.
Are you going
You
to
too, brother.
Icarus Festival?
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
see you there. I'll be there.
When is that?
I think it's in April, June. Is it June? No, June.
Okay.
First week, I think.
I might do a set.
I think, yeah, I'm doing a headline set. I think you're going to be one of the comedians on that show.
All right. Well, I gotta get some Israel jokes together.
You're going to step on all my fucking Israel jokes.
Yeah, we'll
You
trade
think
notes
so?
beforehand.
Yeah, okay. All right, no
Because
problem.
if I go, I
I
have a
can
very
say
strong
stuff that you
pro-Israel
can't,
set.
though.
Yeah, that's right, because you're Jewish.
Not
Just-
anymore, you're not.
Yeah.
You're an
Yeah, that's
anti-selfite. That's what I call you.
They're gonna reverse my bris.
Okay.
We're stapling it back on.
All right. Tell Anya we said hello.
For sure.
Okay, let's go to over to
It's in-
Steph.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy.